Welcome back to Desk Careers. I am so excited to bring another amazing guest. Today we are meeting with Mark Gaitskell, who is the Managing Director at My Sports Academy here in Dubai in the United Arab Emirates. Welcome, Mark. I'm so excited to be with you today and having this conversation, a well-needed conversation.
Pleasure. Thanks very much for the invite.
I think it's really exciting to be meeting with you today, mostly because I on a daily basis, I have young people coming to me saying, Miss V, I'm really passionate about football. I really, really want to be doing this. My teacher, my parent, my brother, my sister, my uncle, my aunt, whoever it is telling me that it might not be the right path, but I don't know, Miss V, it's something that I really want to be focusing on. What can I do with my love for football? And so having this conversation with you, somebody who's clearly very passionate about football. I mean, it takes you all the way back to the early 2000s. What kind of support can you offer us in terms of helping young people is where we want to be heading with this conversation today. So before we jump into the meat and deepen that conversation, let's go back down memory lane. Take me back to the younger Mark, that young teenager, the adolescent who was very vulnerable, really passionate about sport and didn't really know what he wanted to do. Can you remember those days, Mark?
There was no maybe about it. I definitely didn't know what I wanted to do, and sport was the passion. Really, sport was what kept me most engaged at school. It was what I was most passionate about. I was fortunate enough to be fairly academic without having to apply myself, which was a blessing and a curse, I guess. So I wasn't inspired to work really hard from the academic point of view, but I could still get through what I needed to. So I guess as I came out of school and even college, I was lacking direction. I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I wanted to go to university, but actually my mum discouraged me from doing that because she felt I wouldn't fully capitalize on that, and she was 100% correct. So I actually then went into a part-time job because I needed to start earning some money, and it was incredibly boring and incredibly tedious. And it was probably that inspired me to then want to apply myself, want to follow what I really loved doing, which was sport. And I got talking to a friend of mine who was working at Southampton Football Club, who are quite a prestigious sort of youth club and professional club in the UK. He said, well, why don't you get into coaching? Now, I was a good footballer, but I wasn't good enough to make the professional grade. So it was then at that point where you're looking at, well, how can I use sport as a career? What's the vehicle? So coaching, and I said, okay, right, but let's give it a try. And I got into it really, really quickly and progressed really quickly, actually, at the club. And the boring part-time job that I was doing, which was just sort of data entry, and it was not exciting and it was awful. I hated it. But luckily, there were some really great people there who understood that wasn't, what I would be doing long term. And they were great in the sense of they let me sort of keep working there. But as my coaching hours went up, my hours there would go down, and they were great about that. And then sort of what I did was volunteer really around the elite section of the club. So I started off coaching in the community. Now, you've got to be realistic. And I know, and we were talking about this before you started recording, that people will tell you can't earn money and you're going to struggle. Initially, I did. I wasn't earning much money. It's a good hourly rate, if you like, when you're coaching, but they're not full-time hours. You're working 1 or 2 hours a day. So I had to have that other part-time job to try to earn money. And even when you put the wages together, I was still not doing, not earning much money at all. And I was seeing my friends go into sort of more traditional routes in the UK. I had friends who were going down traditional routes into sort of sales and IT and things where there are jobs with sort of attractive initial salaries, and they pull you in and they give you sort of incentives to keep you there. And I've got friends who are still in those careers and have obviously progressed and done well. But if I ask them, are they passionate about those jobs? Do they love their jobs, or do they live for sort of the weekends and then it's back to, I'm back to work on Monday? I'd say some of them are more that route. And I was willing to stick with sport because I loved it. I knew I wanted to forge a career out of it. So I stuck with it, and I was volunteering down at Southampton. So I was driving sort of 45 minutes, sort of there, 45 minutes back for nothing to get around the elite end of the club. So I was volunteering. I was watching really experienced coaches in an elite environment. You know, this is an environment that produces professional players. So I was gaining so much without gaining anything financially, but I was there. I was learning. I was like a sponge. You know, I wanted to see those people work. I wanted to see the players. I wanted to see the environment. I soaked it all up. And then I think that was well received. You know, you never know who's watching. And that was well received at the club. And then an opportunity to get into the academy came up quite quickly. I think I'd only been really working for the club for 9 months. And they moved me into development centres and they offered me this academy position. So I was in that environment, and that was purely based on the fact that I'd shown willingness and hunger and desire and drive, and I was doing stuff sort of voluntarily. So then I got into the academy as an assistant coach and spent 4 seasons there. And then during that time, I then decided, well, right, I'm now going to actually apply myself academically, because I had the skill set to do that. I just never had the attitude and the aptitude to do it. But I was now working in an elite professional environment. I was ready to go to university. My mum let me go this time because she could see that I was then ready to do that. And I went to Southampton University to study, because to me, I looked at people in the football industry then. Lots of coaches were former players, or players who weren't quite good enough to make the grade. So therefore, they kind of skipped that academic part. So I felt like if I could go to university and get a really, really strong result, that might stand me out from people I might be up against. So that was what I did. So I kept working at the club. I went to university. I got a first-class degree where I worked really, really hard. And I felt like university kind of puts people in the wrong initial mindset that, oh, well, you've got to pass your first year. So there were lots of people on the course that just did what they had to in the first year and then couldn't get out of that mindset when the results started counting. But I was working at the same time. So I felt on my career path. So I was at university sort of and working at the club and progressing and gaining experience whilst getting my degree. So I worked really hard, got my first class degree. And then I was at Southampton. I wanted a full-time job. And this is the problem with football in the UK, in that I was still very young, really, in football terms. So I was getting through to final sort of selection for full-time jobs in football, but wasn't quite getting the stage where I was securing one because not quite enough experience, etc. And if I was up against the next professional player who was well connected, there was one winner there. So I ended up going to Fulham for a little while, another amazing sort of youth setup, doing as many other things as I could to try to make a full-time week. But again, was I earning lots of money? No. But was I happy? Was I improving? Was I learning, developing? Yes, 100%. And during sort of that time, I'd worked and coached abroad a few times. So that would for sure, if you had someone following a passion, I would recommend just don't look sort of tunnel vision in terms of where you're based. Like, sport is huge all over the world. And if you ask me what's the biggest thing I've taken from my career so far, I'd probably say the fact that it's taken me all over the world, and as I was about to say, so during that time, I coached a couple of summers in America through a guy who was sort of had a link with Southampton. So it was, it was a good level of coaching. He had a link with the club. He got academy coaches out there to deliver for him. So it was a really good experience, really professional. So I did 2 summers there. during that time, you'd then travel around America a little bit and get to see again some more of the world. Then when I was at Fulham, the Premier League had an initiative called Premier Skills, which was using sort of football and coach education as the vehicle to try to develop communities. So these nations, sort of in less developed footballing nations, would select coaches from all across the country, whichever country that might be. I know it's been delivered in lots of places really successfully. They'd come in, spend some time with English academy football coaches. We'd spend sort of a week, 10 days with them, teaching them the fundamentals of coaching, and then they were expected to go back to their communities and set up community programs. To then get invited onto the next phase would depend upon how much they'd done. So I was selected from Fulham to go to Malaysia. So I went to Kuala Lumpur with 3 other coaches, 1 from Wigan, 2 from West Ham. Had again another amazing experience. So then as I come back to Fulham, it's sort of, well, actually, I think I'd really love to work abroad sort of for a more sustained period. So by then, through some of that international experience, I'd also been to South Africa and done a month at the World Cup with the Football Foundation, which was, again, incredible. And that was just before I came out here. So I'd spread my CV far and wide to all my contacts, and you do that. That's an important part of sport. You need to build up your network and your contacts and speak to as many people and build those relationships. I put my CV far and wide, and it was 2 weeks from first phone call to moving out to the UAE, which actually at the time I thought Dubai was a country. I hadn't heard too much about it. And then out I came, and 11 years later, I'm actually just about to depart. So I've just recently stepped down from my position here. So I'm heading back to the UK and on to the next phase of the journey, wherever that takes me.
That's absolutely incredible, Mark. I'm digesting the journey you just took us on. And I have to say, you touched on a few key points that I hear often from young people. First, if I take you back to the time where you were a younger Mark who wasn't really convinced that academics was the process or the pathway for you, and your mom was very open and understanding about that, and I heard you appreciating that she didn't encourage that at that time for you. I also heard you saying that you took on a job that you were able to very clearly identify was not what you should be doing because it didn't feel right. But you didn't let it all go, and you kind of worked in parallel, which was a very mature process. And then I heard you say that you did eventually find your way back to academics. And this time in doing that, you had family support, and you were also in the program that you could see clearly connected to what you want to be doing. And I also heard you saying that you took on opportunities, whether they were attached to money or not. You took them on as learning opportunities. And I think that in everything that I heard you saying, what stands out the most was I knew I was on the right track, and I took every opportunity that allowed me to fulfill what I felt was the purpose that I wanted to be on in my working career. And here you are today, celebrating that journey with us and preparing yourself for that next step. So when you think about moving forward, I mean, whenever we think about moving forward, we always reflect back. And I think it's no coincidence that we found ourselves to this conversation today at a time when you are looking forward and probably doing a lot of reflecting back. It's kind of like a tango, isn't it? When we're planning that next career step, it's kind of like, where was I and where do I want to go? And what did I learn from that journey? When you're thinking about it, do you find yourself at a crossroads where you're like, this is definitely still what I want to be doing? Or have you achieved a new milestone and think, I definitely want to be in an industry around sport, but I'm ready for a new challenge? Because I think what I'm trying to get to is the understanding for our youth to realize and to appreciate that we're never fixed in a journey, that it's always a journey that we can recreate, kind of like you're doing right now?
I think the biggest thing for me was that I want to be challenged and pushed, and that's a big part of the enjoyment for me. The UAE is a fantastic place. Coming here was the best decision I ever made, for sure, and it's provided, I'd say almost maybe even 20 years experience in a really condensed time, because I didn't face those barriers of, oh, we haven't got enough experience, or because, my CV was seen and recognized that I'd been in some really great organizations, and actually I was ready. So I was given an opportunity, and then I was backed when I lasted 6 months with my first organization here, who let's just say didn't deliver on many things that they said they would. But having said that, I spent almost 6 months learning how not to run a business, which was absolutely invaluable, when I was then thrusted quite quickly into a position of building a business myself from nothing. So I don't look back on those first 6 months negatively at all. Actually, they were invaluable and really, again, great experience. And then, this place is like I said, a brilliant place that it would have been easy and I could have been happy and comfortable staying. But actually, the position I'm in now, I've done it for over a decade, and it doesn't challenge me anymore. It doesn't push me. So I was ready to take that leap, and I've taken that leap because I don't have my next position lined up. You mentioned my sort of coming back to academics. I'm also finishing my master's degree at the moment, so I'm finishing that. So I don't think I would have done it had I had nothing to focus my attention on, because I like to be busy. So I'm finishing my master's, and then I want to take what I've learned to the next step forwards, if you like. I'm very progress based. So the thing for me here is that there isn't necessarily a next step forwards for me in the UAE, because I've ran a company, I've built a company, we got to a fairly good size, obviously quite impacted by COVID, but I've left the business, I feel, in a really good place. And the next step forwards for me doesn't really exist. So I've taken that leap to say, well, I'm going to take the unbelievable experience that the UAE has given me and the developed skill set I now have, that I've also enhanced through now doing my master's, to go back to, let's say, more established sporting nations that are maybe a little bit further ahead of the UAE, places like America, places like the UK, which I'm sure the UAE aspires to get to and will get to eventually, but maybe isn't there right now. They are for sure on a hosting level. They host some internationally really prestigious events and do a fantastic job. But if you look at the infrastructure behind that, in terms of the national teams of the UAE, there's still some work to be done. It's an ambitious place, so I'm sure they'll get there. But right now, I'm looking to go back into a sort of an elite sports organisation, a bigger commercial organisation, rather than I've now run a small medium business now for 10 years, which gives you amazing challenges. I want to take that and actually go into a larger organisation. Where that is and what sport, that's the thing that's again probably evolved. So my master's is in sporting directorship. So football was the passion. Football probably still is the number one passion. But like my business here, we have 4 different sports. I've seen a much broader spectrum of sports and the impact of other sports, and the master's has definitely added to my options and my preference. Is my preference isn't 100% I must stay in football now. It's I'm open to other sports, or even something that was on the periphery of sports where my skill set would transfer to that. I'm very open. I'm just excited about the next stage.
It's very exciting. And for a young person watching you right now, I love how you're taking us through the process, because that's something that we don't learn about. It's what we experience as you are right now. What would you suggest to anyone really enjoying sport, trying to connect the dots between their academics and their passion for sport, and also keeping at bay the voices of the people in their lives that might be dissuading them from going towards sport. What kind of advice can you give that young person?
My advice would be stick with it, be realistic. You know, the chances of making it to the professional level in terms of playing or being an athlete is very low, is very slim. And I think there are lots of false promises and lots of things that are thrown at young athletes to say, oh, you can make it. And of course, some can if you're willing to really sacrifice, really work hard. You know, some will make it, but a much, much, much bigger percentage of people will not make it. And then it's, for me, a question of, well, what are the other aspects of sport that you're passionate about? When I first got into it, I would say there were less career options. You know, coaching was sort of the one that stood out really as the most obvious. You know, now sport is such a huge global business that there are actually lots and lots of routes. You know, you can go the sports science route, you can go the sports business route, you can go the sports marketing route. There are, you know, obviously social media is huge. There's a huge demand for content. The way sort of sports fans are consuming content is changing all of the time. So it's far more digital than it ever was when I was growing up. So there are lots and lots of routes, and I think I would politely tell people, if anyone tells me that sport is not a career path, I would politely tell them to, well, look at the news, look at the TV, look at the newspaper. You know, what is reported all of the time, what has a huge impact on productivity of nations. I'm from a very passionate sports country, England. You know, when the England national football team does well, the country is more productive. That's not speculate. That's a fact. That's proven. You know, so sport has a really, really huge impact on society. You know, and it does have the power to really unite people and pull people together. It can do the opposite too in certain situations. But there are so many career paths, and for me, my advice would be you need to try to make yourself stand out. So what can you do that stands you out from the other 10 people that have an interest in chasing that career path? For me, what I did was I volunteered. I did stuff for free. I got around people so that they knew who I was, knew what I wanted to do, knew what I wanted to be. So that then when the opportunities came up, I was at the forefront of their mind because I was doing things voluntarily. Then probably the next thing was to go and get my degree at the same time and work at the same time. As you know, there's a huge temptation to just go to university and have a great time, and the studying and the great time maybe are on a par, when actually going to university now is really expensive. So if you're not going to go there and give your absolute best, you're doing yourself a disservice, not just from your own career path, but also from a financial perspective. You're spending all that money. You should really absolutely maximize what you are getting back for that money. And that means attending all of your classes, work really, really hard, and don't work really hard when the results count from year 2 onwards. You know, work really hard from the beginning. And if you're in a position to gain some experience at the same time, I would 100% vouch for the benefits of that. Because when I left university, I had 5 years coaching experience under my belt, as well as a first class degree. So that for sure helped me. If I look at now my cohort of people who were on a very sport specific degree, the number of people working in sport is not high. But the ones who are the ones who did the things I've just described to you, for sure.
Mark, it has been such a pleasure talking to you. I could go on and on and on, but I'm very conscious of your time. And in bringing it together, if I were to take you back to that younger Mark, the one that didn't know what he wanted to do, and said, this is your journey, what would you wish that we could have added to the journey to make it even more exciting than it already is?
Oh, that's a tough question, that, Maria. Because I look back at the journey and think, actually, had I not gone through the challenging periods in terms of not knowing what I wanted to do, lacking direction, not earning much money, I don't think I'd have gone on the route that I have done, which I've thoroughly enjoyed. And I'm again, it would come down to, I think, your values. You can earn money in sport, for sure. You can, if you're willing to work hard, if you're willing to set yourself apart from a crowded room, and be willing to apply yourself. I'm a big believer that the more of the world you see and the more experiences you have, the richer you are. So for me, I know that sport is quite a glamorous business now, and there are probably lots of people pursuing professional playing careers for different reasons than when I was playing football as a young guy. I just loved playing the game. There's lots of people who might now want the crazy weekly salaries and the cars and that life, but sport can be a vehicle to see the world, have amazing experiences, meet amazing people, because people play sport all over the world, in different places, different environments, for different reasons. And sport is a global language. So my advice would be always to just cast your net. If you're not getting the opportunities you want in the place you are, it's a big world, and it's a big sporting world. So look maybe beyond your current circumstances. Don't be discouraged if things don't immediately fall in your plate. Work harder and be willing to go out of your comfort zone to maybe a place you hadn't thought you'd end up, and you'd be surprised the amazing experiences that can come your way.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you for sharing the journey and giving us these insights. Thank you, everybody, for watching. Today, we were speaking with Mark Gaitskell, who talked to us about his journey through his passion of football, where he started as a young person that didn't really know what he wanted to do, made his way through football coaching, and went back into education, about to complete his Master of Sport in university and getting ready for that next career milestone. Thank you, everybody, for watching, and I will see you all at our next Desk Careers Digital Spotlights.